Diving into crypto land this week, February 23rd through March 1st, 2025.
Buckle up.
Yeah, gotta need those seatbelts, right? Using the crypto market report from Crypto Deep Dive, as always.
Our trusty guide.
It is, to see what happened and, well, why you should care about all of this. And I think this week, it's not just another week, right?
No, not at all.
This is Bitcoin's worst month.
Oh, yeah?
Since June of 22. So we're going to unpack all of the reasons why. Trump-era trade policies, the aftermath of this major hack.
It's a lot to cover.
It is. So let's get right into it, huh?
Let's do it.
Let's start with the big kahuna, right?
Yeah. Bitcoin, of course.
Bitcoin started strong.
As it often does.
Around 95,000.
Yeah.
But ended at
$84,783.
an 11% drop.
Which, even for Bitcoin is pretty significant.
That is a big drop.
It is.
And, I think that June 2022 drop, I can't help but think there's some sort of correlation there.
Yeah, it's interesting you bring that up because that was also a time of tightening monetary policy and fears of a recession.
So seeing this pattern again kind of suggests that, these macroeconomic factors are playing a really big role in investor sentiment.
Yeah, and the report that we're looking at here, the Crypto Deep Dive report, they highlight three main drivers for this downturn. And the first being macroeconomic uncertainty. So, we have Trump back in the White House.
And, with him comes this potential for trade wars.
Right, those trade war vibes are back.
Yeah.
And investors, they don't like uncertainty.
Right. It makes them nervous, and I think they're seeing a potential repeat of 2018.
A little flashback.
Yeah, maybe a little bit of a flashback to those trade wars.
And then the second driver is the institutional activity.
Yeah, and this is really interesting because the report notes that big players started pulling out of Bitcoin ETFs.
What does that tell us?
I think that's a pretty clear signal that confidence is waning.
Yeah, are they thinking long-term, this is not a good investment? I think some of them are hedging their bets for sure. While institutional interest has grown tremendously in the crypto space, this pullback indicates that they're still, they're still sensitive to these macroeconomic risks, and there's still a lot of regulatory uncertainty.
Yeah, still a lot up in the air.
Absolutely.
And then the third driver, kind of adding insult to injury, is just market panic.
Yeah, and this is where the Bybit hack comes in.
I can get into that a little bit later.
Yeah.
But, this kind of perfect storm of negativity,
it really amplifies that sell-off.
It makes everybody run for the hills.
Exactly.
So you've got Bitcoin down Ethereum, kind of goes hand in hand with Bitcoin a lot of times.
Oh, for sure. There's a lot of correlation there.
And it also dropped 13% down to $2,181.
Right.
So, is this just that usual correlation, or is there more to Ethereum's story?
Well, the correlation definitely plays a role, but even with the upwards, the Ethereum 2.0 upgrades that have been happening, there just wasn't enough positive news to really counteract this downward pressure.
It was just too much.
It was
everything going wrong at the same time.
Yeah.
And, the report mentions the fear and greed index, which I always find fascinating.
Oh, it's a good one.
It dropped to extreme fear.
Which tells you a lot about the psychological state of the market.
Can you just quickly explain to the listener what that means if they're not familiar with this index?
Sure. So the fear and greed index basically measures market sentiment based on things like volatility, trading volume, and even trends on social media.
Wow.
So a reading of extreme fear suggests that investors are just super risk averse, right?
Yeah.
And that often leads to more selling.
So it's kind of like a self-fulfilling prophecy in a way.
It can be, yeah. Fear feeds fear.
And speaking of fear, Solana took an 11% hit, closing at $141.
Oof, that's rough.
But Solana's story is kind of its own thing because of this FTX token unlock.
Yeah. Right. That was a big one.
Can you break that down for us?
Sure. So FTX, which is a major cryptocurrency exchange, had a bunch of SLL tokens locked up.
Right.
And this unlock basically means they were scheduled to release 11.2 million of those SOL tokens back into circulation.
And why does that spook investors so much?
Well, imagine a sudden influx of any asset into the market.
Yeah.
It's naturally going to create concerns about oversupply, which can potentially drive the price down, at least in the short term.
Classic supply and demand.
Exactly, but with a crypto twist.
A crypto twist, yeah.
Yeah.
So amidst all of this, all of this red on the charts.
Yeah, it was a sea of red.
One DeFi token dared to be green.
A little bit of green, gotta love it.
Maker, MKR, it jumped 23.90%.
Wow.
What made Maker stand out in a week like this?
Well, I think it highlights how these individual projects can have their own narratives and catalysts.
Okay.
In this case, there were probably some positive developments within Maker's DeFi ecosystem, things like new partnerships or upgrades to the protocol. That likely drove the price increase, despite what was happening in the broader market.
So there's always opportunity out there.
There is. Even in a bear market, there are opportunities for growth and innovation.
Well, before we move on to the top news stories of the week, I want to get your initial thoughts on these market movements.
It's been a potent reminder that crypto is inherently volatile, right? I mean, we've seen how global events, institutional actions, and these project-specific developments can all converge and create these really dramatic swings.
Right, yeah.
So I think it underscores the importance of staying informed.
Mm-hmm.
You really have to understand both the macro and the micro forces that are at play.
The big picture and the small picture.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's a lot to keep track of.
It is.
It's almost like this constant feedback loop, right?
It is.
Where information influences perception, which then drives price action.
Absolutely.
So, speaking of news, the report also touched on some interesting Solana developments.
That kind of got overshadowed by the FTX token unlock.
Right, amidst all the craziness, right?
Yeah.
Solana introduced those blinks and actions features.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, from what I was reading, it's supposed to make transactions super smooth, like letting users connect with dApps without even leaving a website.
That's pretty impressive.
Yeah, sounds like
A
good thing.
But it's interesting how, even these positive developments can get kind of buried.
Yeah.
When the market sentiment is overwhelmingly negative,
Right.
it's a reminder that timing is everything in crypto.
Yeah, sometimes it feels like the market just wants to focus on the negative.
It does.
Speaking of which, the report mentioned that the overall crypto market cap took a hit, dropping to $2.94 trillion.
And trading volume shrunk as well.
So what does that tell us?
It really just reflects that broader risk-off sentiment that we've been talking about.
Okay.
When fear takes hold, investors pull back, less activity across the board.
And adding to the gloom, Bitcoin ended February with its worst monthly performance since, you guessed it, June 2022.
There it is again.
A 17% drop.
From over $100,000 down to $84,000.
That's a lot.
That's a big drop.
It's like everything that could go wrong did go wrong for Bitcoin that month.
Yeah, it really highlights how those macroeconomic fears we talked about, coupled with some profit-taking by early investors, and then, of course, the ongoing uncertainty about U.S. crypto policies.
That's just a lot.
So, yeah, all of it contributed to the downward pressure.
But hey, at least the week ended with a slight recovery, right?
A little glimmer of hope.
Back up to $84,783.
Even a small bounce can be encouraging in a bearish market. It shows that there are still buyers out there. And, sentiment can shift quickly.
So we've got price movements, news, sentiment. We've covered a lot of ground here.
It's been quite a deep dive so far.
It has.
But it's important to remember that while this particular week was exceptionally volatile, these kinds of fluctuations, they're just part and parcel of the crypto market. It's still a relatively young and evolving asset class.
Yeah, very much the Wild West out there still.
It is.
But what are some key takeaways that we can pull from this that go beyond the events of that week?
Right.
What should our listeners be thinking about?
Well, I think this week really emphasizes a few crucial points.
Okay.
For anyone who's involved in crypto, whether you're an investor or you're just curious about the space, first and foremost, crypto is deeply intertwined with global events and macroeconomic trends.
So it's not just enough to watch the crypto charts.
It's not.
You got to have your finger on the pulse of what's happening.
Yeah, you got to be paying attention to what's happening in the world, too.
Absolutely.
The second takeaway is that regulatory developments, or even just the anticipation of them, can have a huge impact.
So is that why the White House Crypto Summit kind of injected some optimism into the week?
It could be, even though it's still weeks away.
Yeah.
It just goes to show how much weight investors place on regulatory clarity.
Especially in the U.S.
Absolutely, especially in the U.S., where those rules of the game are still being written.
Yeah, very much so.
The third takeaway is that, individual projects and tokens, they can have their own unique narratives and catalysts. And sometimes they even defy the overall market trend. We saw that with Maker, right? Surging while everything else was crashing.
Yeah.
You can't just follow the herd,
No, you got to do your research.
You have to do your own research on specific projects and understand what's driving their performance.
And lastly,
volatility is inherent to this market.
Yeah.
This week was a wild ride. But those fluctuations are part of what makes crypto so potentially rewarding.
And so risky.
But also so risky, exactly.
So how does all of this connect back to our listener?
Well, we've seen how crypto is influenced by all these things. Global events, regulatory changes, project-specific developments, and of course, that ever-present volatility.
Right.
So what does this mean for their decisions as an investor, or even just someone who's interested in this space?
That's the big question.
Yeah, I think it means understanding that crypto, for all its potential, is still a relatively young and evolving market.
Yeah.
It's a space where innovation happens really fast, but uncertainty and risk are always there.
So it's more than just picking the right coins.
It is. It's about navigating this complex and dynamic landscape.
So what kind of mindset does someone need to have?
A mindset of continuous learning, of adapting to change, of being comfortable with uncertainty, and of course, of managing risk wisely.
We've explored the highs, the lows, that crazy week from Bitcoin's tumble, Solana's challenges.
Maker's surprising surge.
But now let's zoom out.
Yeah, the bigger picture.
The big picture. What did this crazy week reveal about the future of crypto?
I think it was a good reminder that crypto is still in its early stages, right?
Yeah.
And volatility is part of the deal?
It comes with the territory.
It does. It does. But it also showcased the remarkable resilience of this market, despite facing all these headwinds, macroeconomic uncertainty, security concerns. The crypto ecosystem continues to innovate and evolve.
Like a constant tug of war.
It is.
Between fear and optimism, risk and opportunity.
Precisely. Yeah. And it's interesting how intertwined crypto is becoming with global events and traditional financial systems.
Yeah, you can't separate them anymore.
You can't. We saw that with the impact of potential trade wars and, the institutional activity in Bitcoin ETFs.
Yeah, it's like crypto is becoming too big to ignore.
It is. It's like everyone's having to grapple with its implications now. Governments, institutions, even everyday investors.
So as this unfolds, what should our listener be watching closely? What are the key trends or developments? What's going to shape the future of this market?
Well, regulatory clarity is going to be huge. The outcome of that White House crypto summit could have a massive impact, not just on the U.S. market, but, by extension, the global crypto landscape.
It's like everyone's holding their breath to see what happens, what direction we're going to go in.
Another trend to watch is the evolution of DeFi. We saw how Maker just kind of defied the market downturn. And this suggests that DeFi could be even more important for growth and innovation.
Yeah, DeFi is definitely something I'm personally keeping an eye on. It's like watching the birth of a new financial system.
It really is. It's pretty exciting.
And blockchain technology itself, right? I mean, if Ethereum 2.0 is a huge milestone.
It is.
And we're seeing other blockchains like Solana really making those strides in scalability and user experience.
For sure.
It's a good time to be following all of this stuff.
It is an exciting time.
Any other final thoughts for our listeners?
Yeah, keep an eye on institutional adoption.
Okay.
We saw how that impacted Bitcoin's price.
Right.
As more institutions enter the crypto arena, it's going to be really interesting to see how they shape those market dynamics and investor sentiment.
It feels like we're on the cusp of something big here, like a new era for crypto, where it transitions from a niche technology to a mainstream asset class.
And the next few years will be pivotal in determining how that plays out.
Well, we've covered a lot of ground today.
We have.
From Bitcoin's crazy ride to broader trends shaping the future. And we've seen how it's all intertwined, how it's constantly evolving. But the key takeaway, the one thing I want everyone to remember, is the crypto world. It's fascinating and complex.
It is.
Full of surprises, and it demands that we stay informed, stay curious.
Or maybe a little skeptical.
Yeah, keep a healthy dose of skepticism. Until next time, keep exploring, keep learning, and, as always, happy investing.